Hello and welcome to Comic Island. My name is Arden, and this is my review of Red Hood and the Outlaws Annual number 2. So this is the winner of this week's Patreon poll, and I was interested in checking out this series. It's been a while since we last looked at it, but I have to say, as of the Rebirth era, I've been really enjoying this series. As it zeroes in on Red Hood, Artemis, and Bizarro, we've gotten a real strong character work. And Scott Lobdell, once a bit of a misguided writer during the New 52, has definitely earned the accolade of most improved based on his writing from the New 52 era compared to his writing in Rebirth. In general, I just am really enjoying the guy and his work a lot more. He's got a much better public persona that isn't getting into stupid internet fights with fans, and he's doing a much better job at addressing some of the concerns that people had with his writing in the New 52 without overcorrecting. He simply has improved on all the little problems with that earlier series. Its shallow character work, its over-sexualization of its own characters. It all just has been so much better in Rebirth times, and I really enjoy what's going on. A good example of that is even in this comic. We see Jason Todd all shirtless and working out at one point, but it's not exploitative. It's part of the story and reflects his healing his injuries from the beginning of this story. Because that's pretty much where things begin. Artemis and Bizarro have gone missing, and the Red Hood is all alone, basically hanging out on an island with his best friend Arsenal, while being badly injured and not knowing what to do. As far as he can tell, thanks to a crashed Camarian cruiser on the island, Bizarro and Artemis are nowhere to be found in the multiverse, and it's clearly weighing on him. Together with Arsenal, who also is struggling and is dealing with a lot of stuff on his own end from the Titans series, these two men have to deal with reaching a low point in their lives. Not the lowest point for either of them, but certainly a low point. But the wonderful thing about this comic is that for all these dark tones and serious misgivings for two characters who have been through a lot in their lives and have always been relatively darker compared to other superheroes, it's a bright and colorful comic, it's cheerful, and it's funny. It gets me, not every joke works for me, but it makes me laugh more than once throughout the issue. And it works. It's pretty dark, but it doesn't overplay its hand and is appropriate to the tone at the surface. That all makes it for a very fun read. I quite enjoy this thing. The whole art team and the editors behind it really do a good job at walking the line between a relatively dark story, yet also a fun superhero team adventure. That's not really the exact plot line we're getting here. We don't even have a full team at this point. But the focus in on Jason and Roy, their own struggles and what happens to them throughout this issue are really well done. Roy basically ends up not joining the team or the series, instead talking to his sponsor, Killer Croc, and deciding to chuck himself back into rehab once he helps Jason get back on his feet. Jason, meanwhile, has a lot of work ahead of him to try and find his lost friends, and it's unclear. He has no leads. He has no idea where they might be or where to go next. But we do get a bit of a hint of where they are now at the end of this comic, with a new art team that presumably is going to be doing the next arc, and features the current whereabouts of Artemis and Bizarro. They seem to be in some sort of dark universe from the dark multiverse that we saw in Dark Knight's Metal. That'd be my guess based on the little glimpse of the world that we saw at the end of their story, but in either case, I'm pretty excited to see what happens next. There's two separate art teams on this thing, and each are doing their own main thing, but the main artist behind all of this is Clayton Henry and Marcelo Mello, who does the colors. Those two guys do a great job at really selling the main story, while the new team featuring Neil Googe, Wade Von Garbadger, and again Marcelo Mello doing these really interesting colors within the series. It's a great comic and a really fun annual. It does what I think any good annual should do, that's not the only thing that a good annual has to be. They can be a lot of different things, but are usually best as side stories or bridges between certain story arcs, and that's exactly what this does, the latter of those two. It successfully takes us from the current goings-on in the Red Hood series to what happens next, with Red Hood kind of going solo, looking for his friends, while setting up some interesting ideas that we'll see what is made of going forward. I would recommend it. It's not the best Rebirth series in the world, but that's because Rebirth's quality and average benchmark is very high at this point. they've raised the bar so much in terms of what I expect out of a DC comic these days that even something like this, which would be among the very best of any series in the New 52 era, really is average or above average as best in terms of Rebirth comics. But don't get me wrong, that doesn't make it bad or even average in terms of the average superhero comic. It's just average in terms of a Rebirth comic. And that tends to be a pretty high standard to reach and to meet. So the fact that it achieves this is great, especially considering how troubling I found the Red Hood series in the New 52 era. And it was troubling. It was one of the worst ones out there. So to go from worst to a fantastic and outstanding series overall is a strong achievement on Scott Lobdell's part. And while he owes a lot of that to his various artists and editors, it really comes down to him accepting criticism in a very positive way. He didn't make a big deal out of it. He didn't make a huge dramatic change. He just quietly addressed some of the concerns about his series and worked on it and really improved himself. That deserves so much admiration. We throw, in general, the comic book and fan community can throw a lot of criticism some people's ways, but to see a creator actually truly improve their work in a positive direction without being passive aggressive or really crummy about it is a wonderful thing. So I have to give a lot of props to Scott Lobdell for that. It really means something that this series has become so much better, and he's been able to do it without getting into fights with fans or anything crazy like that is admirable, and I do appreciate him doing so. And yeah, that's about it for the review. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section below, and thanks for watching. If you like Comic Island, be sure to check out our Patreon page, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep reading comics.